Ladies and gentlemen, Craig Havinghurst and Mike Mills. You guys play nice.
We'll try, Tom. Thanks for the opportunity, my friends. Hey, everyone. Good evening. This is great. And here's Mike, and I'm Craig, and I'm excited about a conversation. Tom did give away his first R.E.M. show story, but I couldn't tell whether he was giving away the connection, because when I met Tom, did he tell this? I met Tom for breakfast. We didn't know each other. We were having the get-to-know-you breakfast. It took us 4 minutes to determine that we had been at the same R.E.M. first show in March of 1983, and so we decided, whatever else I know about you, you're cool. We're gonna be just fine. Mike, it's a treat to talk to you, and let me start by saying that night began a musical adventure and experience for me that didn't just open the door to your band, but opened the door to a whole way of listening to music and a whole way of searching for music, and an amazing experience that I've never been through with any other band, with waiting for each successive album. I've never been so attached to a band, but you really did shape for folks of a certain generation. So let me begin by saying thank you for the music, because
my pleasure.
It was
Thank
an
you.
extraordinary experience. Love to begin by asking about Nashville and what experiences you have. I know you recorded here, but what stands out about Nashville for you all as a band, and what did it bring out in you?
Well, Nashville was the state of Tennessee and the state of North Carolina basically paid our rent for the first year of our existence, because it was close enough for us to travel for the weekend, and we would play Nashville and Memphis and go home with enough money to pay the cheap rent that was Athens, Georgia. There's some really great guys. Bruce Fitzpatrick, who runs the Inn here, wonderful guy, great supporter of independent music and live music. He and his partner Rick used to run in some places that again paid our rent, and were great supporters of the band and music in general. So, and then we've always loved this town. It is literally Music City, USA. So how can you not love it? And we were very happy to be able to come here and make a record many years later with our friend Gary Laney at the Sound Emporium.
Oh wow, in my neighborhood. You also did some dates with Jason and the Scorchers. Was that part of a band? Was that part of a scene that you, as Southern rockers, did you feel akin?
Yeah, there was some kindred spirit action going on with Jason and the Scorchers. We used to just have some serious fun at Cantrell's, and for subsequent hours afterwards at whoever's house was stupid enough to have us over. But no, they were just an amazing band to see Jason, one of the nicest, most polite guys in the world, get on this stage and go absolutely insane. Yeah. And Warner Hodges, an incredible guitar player, just so much fun to watch, and heckle from the audience. So yeah, I mean, we just felt such a kinship with this town and the people in it since the very beginning.
You became a Southerner, not by choice and not by birth, but by moving. As I read, you were 10 years old or so.
Oh, much less than that. I was born in California, but my parents are both from Georgia. We were only in California because my dad was in the Marines, and my mother wanted to be near him when I was born. So we went out there. I came out, and then we came back here. And and I've been in Georgia since I was probably 6 months old.
Oh, okay. So not a transplant, but then you went to it was at university that you met the band, right? And just give us a little sketch for folks who don't know just how the four came together in the university town that was Athens.
Well, Bill Berry and I were enemies in high school, and a mutual friend, a guitar player, put us together in a band, and Bill came over to my house and he says, "No way am I playing with that guy." And I said, "Well, same to you."
Wow.
But we ended up giving it a shot, and so Bill Berry and I were in a band in Macon, Georgia for many years, and then we both decided that literally over Mexican food one night, I said to Bill, if we don't get out of here right now, we are never leaving Macon, Georgia. And that's not going to be good. So we both went to college, where we met these two destitute musicians, and who clearly needed some professionalism in their lives. And so we formed a band.
You sure did. And there's something about the naturalness of the foursome that, have you looked back and thought there was a certain inevitability about it, that there was a meant-to-be quality here with these four characters who each brought something?
That's well said. Any band that works out because of the chemistry, the musical chemistry, the interpersonal chemistry, the things that go into making a band, the whole greater than the sum of the parts, when you look back on it, it seems inevitable. I just watched 8 Days a Week, the Beatles movie, incredible Ron Howard Beatles movie, which is fantastic. And you look at it and you go, well, of course those guys formed a band. How could they not? But if you are in a band, you know just the fragile nature of the fact that, what if they hadn't met? I mean, it could have been easily that they never saw each other. But the fact that they did and formed the best band of all time. So it's just one of those weird chemistry things that some people go through 10 bands and never find that chemistry. And we happen to find it on, Bill and I's second band, Peter's first, Michael's second or third, but he doesn't talk about that.
Love to hear a little your thoughts about each individual member and what they brought personally and musically, what their strong suits were that made it click. And let's start with Bill, and you've known longest.
Well, Bill is one of the most orchestral drummers you'll ever hear. He was in Macon Little Theater when we were both there in high school, and I think that probably gave him a lot of his structure where he doesn't just get back there and bash the drums, not that there's anything wrong with that, but he creates musical drum parts. And I always use Wolves Lower Wolves as the best example of that off our first EP. It's a great song, but it's Bill's inventive and imaginative drumming that makes it as special as it is. Bill was also very much about brevity. He was always the one that's like, that's too long. No, you can't have another chorus. Turn it off.
Okay.
And usually he was right.
Do you look back and I couldn't tell you if your songs felt super short, right around 3 minutes. Is there something to say about that?
Well, you always try to self-edit. We were all musical history students enough to know that self-indulgence is not the direction you want to go. And so we always tried to figure out what was essential for the song. At what point were you adding? Did you have things in the song that really didn't need to be there? And Bill was always the best at pointing those things out to us.
And a bass player needs a drummer that they react to. Can you talk about what he made you want to do and what you were able to do because of him?
Well, it's very true. One of the things about R.E.M. was that none of us played traditionally. I played a very melodic, some say too busy bass. Peter didn't bash out chords. He played arpeggios, which made every song have 10 melodies in it at one time. And so playing with Bill, somehow the pieces just fit, that Bill's playing left me room to do what I wanted to do, and there was plenty of room for Bill to do, as creative a part as he felt like playing. So it was just one of those things where it was four people who did not play or sing in a traditional manner came together to make something that actually worked.
Peter Buck, what's his personality like? What kind of person was he that helped? In the biography, he comes off a bit acerbic, a bit tough on the musical culture, and wanted to be pretty aloof from it.
Well, Peter was always very self-assured. He was a very worldly guy when we met him. He had lived in a lot of cities. I think he had kind of, at least emotionally, been on his own for many years, and was just very clear that he could leave at any time. And so you better do it his way or he's out the door.
Don't make him mad.
Fortunately, his way was the right way, so that was always a good thing. But he's a total musical historian. He had read everything he could read and listened to everything he could hear, and his wealth of knowledge was one of the best things that we could have ever had going forward. He will be the first to say that his guitar ability was limited and specific, and so rather than try to play too much or do things he felt he couldn't do, he chose to play in a particular style that is actually much harder than what he thought was more difficult. So his arpeggiation, his finger picking, his flat picking is just It's the thing that gave us the sound that we had. It's the thing that created the melodies that we have. It's the thing that created room for Bill and I to have the fun that we had. He's a master at it, and he's one of the best guitar players in rock and roll history, as far as I'm concerned.
Did the Rickenbacker as his vehicle become something that was very much by choice or happy accident?
No, the Rickenbacker was very specifically chosen. I think it had to do with John Lennon, Pete Townsend. I mean, all the people that Peter loved. And plus, it's the best looking guitar ever made, and the bass is the same thing. And I was more than happy to play that. No, they had a great sound. They had a great look. It was also slightly out of the mainstream for what people were playing in 1979, 1980. There weren't a lot of people playing Rickenbacker. They were sort of déclassé. They were like, oh no, it's not macho. It's not rock and roll enough. And in fact, it's the most rock and roll instrument made. So we were thrilled to have that.
Were any of you all deeply into folk music? Did Peter listen to Doc Watson, or did you? I couldn't quite tell. You read the influences, and it's television and Patti Smith and Big Star, and those are easy to detect. But there's also a folk strain that runs through that I was attracted to. Was it explicit?
It's one of those things. But between the four of us, we listened to and enjoyed just about every kind of music there was, and to try to go in any one direction and say, well, this is where that came from, or this is where that came from, it's really difficult. Folk music for Peter would have been more English folk music, the Incredible String Band, Richard Thompson, anything that Joe Boyd produced would have been something that Peter would have listened to. For me, it was, my mother used to play Joan Baez on the hi-fi all the time, so that was most of the folk music I knew. So sure, there's an essential history that folk music represents and continues to keep alive that I think was important to us in that sense. But it was a little, softer than we really wanted to do. We like to make more noise than that.
Okay, right. And the amazing and enigmatic Michael Stipe. What were your first impressions? And I imagine that he was somebody who may have revealed himself in layers over time.
Well, the main epiphanal moment I remember was when we got together for the first time. Bill Berry, as I said, we'd been in a band in Macon, and we had songs. So we showed those guys the 3 or 4 or 5 songs that we had from Macon, and what they did with them, what Peter and Michael both did with them. Bill and I were like, these guys are good. Okay, they have something. And it was both Peter's style of playing and Michael's voice and the approach Michael took to it melodically and sonically. We were just really thrilled and impressed about that. So it was that sort of thing that made Bill and I feel good about going forward. Certainly Michael, what hasn't been said or written about Michael, but his approach is so unique and specific and non-linear, which was what we loved about it. The voice was another instrument for the many, many years with us. We didn't care about words. He didn't care about words. It wasn't about the words. It was about the sound. It was about the power. It was about the emotion. It was about the melody, which he's a genius at. So all those things were, I didn't care if he wrote any words at all, and in many cases he didn't. So that worked out really well.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I know in retrospect that my attraction to the band had so much to do with the overall aural impression, the sound, that I didn't need lyrics at that point. I listened to jazz. I grew up on classical, and it was really cool to hear a band and one of the things that was a feature, and especially reviewing, every song has got some little particular dissonance or tension musically. Were you all looking for chords that was something in each song that was a little dirty or a little weird, and a lot of times it comes from your bass?
I think we always wanted to avoid cliche whenever possible, musical or lyrical or in any other way. Sometimes you have to go through cliches to know how to avoid them. But I think we managed to between us, we had all listened to a lot of music, even in 1979. So we all knew how it could be done. And we all said, well, let's not do it that way. Let's do it another way. So, yes, dissonance was always a very essential thing for us. I think the Velvet Underground were a rather dissonant band in many cases, even though they made beautiful, lilting, lovely thoughtful music, but there was always an element of, that came in there, and it made it special. So we were always happy to throw in some noise.
Yeah. But you weren't a chaos band. Michael would get pretty kinetic and nuts on stage, but you weren't a band that ever, to my knowledge, when I saw you, was just go into sheer mayhem, guitar crashing. It was the pop sensibility and the song structure stayed there.
Well, that's the records. The live shows were very different. We were always happy to be a train wreck whenever we could. I mean, kicking over amps and drum sets is half the reason people form a band anyway, I think, because it is about as much fun as you're going to have on stage, and especially if it's not your equipment. But no, we always enjoyed noise. It's one of the reasons we were so attracted to the Gang of Four. When they came out, they were just so, there was a beautiful melodicism in there, but it was also very angular and very noisy, and we totally adapted that into our sound. But yeah, the chaos was important. You can write beautiful, structured songs with beautiful melodies, but that'll get old if you don't throw some nastiness in there somewhere.
The work ethic struck me reading the long story. Just once it got going, you were out and ever out. And I'd love for you to talk about that and what was fueling it, and whether there was some strategic design there or it was just what you most wanted to do.
Well, we formed a band to play. We made records. We made our first 45 and EP so that we could send something to the club owners so they'd know that they wanted to book us. We played anywhere and everywhere and as often as possible because that's why we formed a band. And back when we started, there was no circuit. There were no real clubs that already existed to go play. So we would go play anywhere. People would do it. There were a lot of people that loved live music and would turn their bar or their restaurant or their pizza joint. They'd clear the tables and put in a little crappy PA and have a band come in. So, that's what we would do. We would play anywhere and everywhere. We played gay discos. We played biker bars. We played, so many new wave nights I can't even tell you. Just because that's who was willing to have us on stage. And the work ethic, yes, it was one of those things where we weren't. You try not to take what you do too seriously, but at the same time you have to be serious about it. Our ethic was, in terms of not missing shows, if you're not in the hospital, you're on stage. And that was pretty much the case. I mean, I think really we canceled 2 or 3 shows in the first 15 years of our existence because we just didn't believe in not showing up.
Another factor of the 4 of you that is impressive is that somehow you took 4 well-developed and strong tastes about music, and instead of that becoming a chaotic or argumentative process, it seemed to become like a super filter, like bad ideas and cliches went by the wayside, and what came out the other end of this 4-person filter was impressive and distinct. Is there something to be said about that, how you negotiated?
Well, we all had good taste. I mean, I will say that. Not 100%, but most of the time. We made an early rule called the Vito Rule. Whereas if there was something that someone in the band really, really hated and really couldn't abide, you were allowed to say no. And the rest of us had to have enough faith and trust in their judgment, not only to be right, but not to abuse that power. That if someone said, okay, this is terrible, I don't want to do that, then we would have to say yes. It was truly a functioning democracy in so many ways in a situation where that usually doesn't work, but it did for us.
So usually questions about producers are a little tedious, but this is an industry town. People are fascinated by it, and I am fascinated by Mitch Easter and Don Dixon as somebody who grew up in the South and felt that pulse of Southern pop and rock and the beautiful melodicism that they brought. I loved the DBs. I loved Let's Active, and you all were of a piece of this community in my mind. So if you could talk about those 2 guys and chemistry and why, moving ahead together.
Well, as I've always said, there are 3 things that go into making a great band, and that is some talent, hard work, and a lot of luck. And we had all those in spades. And early on, when we wanted to make our first single, to have a calling card we asked our friend Peter Holzapfel of the DBs, who should we get to work on our record? He said, well, there's this guy, Mitch Easter, that lives in Winston-Salem and has a studio in his parents' garage. And we said, well, that sounds perfect. We'll go do that. And thus was born one of the great unions, I think, in all of independent music. So we worked with Mitch, and we did a couple of things with him. And then when we got signed with IRS and we were going to make our album, he didn't feel comfortable enough to go work in a major recording studio, Reflection Studios in Charlotte, North Carolina, home of Tammy Faye Baker, by the way, just so we're clear. So Mitch got his friend Don Dixon to come in and handle the more professional side of being in the studio. And they were great. I mean, it was just a wonderful pairing, and we were so lucky to have gotten hooked up with Mitch and then Don, and their sensibilities were right in line with ours, and it was one of those things that just streamlined and worked very well.
Right, they totally understood. A big picture question, and leading toward Out of Time here, the rather rare experience of a band that is a big success gradually. I'm sure you've been asked about this and thought about it, but there must be rewards to that. I'm always skeptical and wary of booms and bubbles, that you can just see that graph go up and you think, oh, that's great, but something's going to come down. But what worked, and how did it affect the art?
Well, we were very lucky in so many ways about the timing in which we came onto our musical adulthood, the record company that we signed with, IRS Records. We were very lucky that we had complete creative control from the very beginning. And also, we had a record company that was willing to grow with us and let us become whatever it was we were going to become. Every record sold a little more than the one before it. So, whatever pressures, whatever success, whatever fame came our way in small enough doses that we were able to handle it and grow into it, grow up as adults, grow up as musicians, and be able to deal with the ever increasing falderall that came along with it. We were also smart enough to know that moving out of Athens and moving to a big city would be a really big mistake. So we would go on tour and have all this great fun, and then go back home and be grounded and have our friends tell us we sucked. And it was all the things that kept us real. Instead of going to New York City where everybody wants to kiss your ass. And we never had anybody kiss our ass, damn it. So, but that's what kept us sane, I think, through all those years.
That's amazing. Well, we probably should talk about Out of Time because we don't want to run out of time. The story goes that Green, the album prior to it, was maybe the one that, while it didn't do badly, everybody thought maybe it might have done a little better, and there was a tour that was more difficult and some larger rooms that weren't as full, and maybe for the first time you said, is that an accurate narrative? How lead us up for the year or two to recording?
I don't know what you mean about rooms that weren't full. I didn't see that.
It's in the book, man.
In terms of how we approached Out of Time.
Well, yeah. How did the reaction to or the album Green leading up to Out of Time shape what you wanted to do?
Well, even with Green, we had already started working with alternate approaches to songwriting instrumentation. There are two songs on Green that were written on mandolin, one by Peter and one by Bill, and by the end of the Green tour, we were on the road for a year, and it was insane. And by the end of it, we were insane. And so we said, okay, we need to step back and reassess. So what we did was we reassessed everything: the need to tour, the instrumentation, the approach to songwriting, whether we were going to be political anymore, overtly. And so all of those things went into the mixer of how are we going to do the next record. So we said, all right, well, we'll just write songs on different instruments. We'll record on different instruments. I played a lot of keyboards. Bill played bass. Peter played balalaika and mandolin and acoustic guitar. And Michael decided to write quote-unquote love songs, or a lot of them. And of course, Michael Stipe's love songs are not going to be like anyone else's love songs, thank goodness. And we did want to get away from the political thing. As I like to say, I met met Ted Turner once, and he says, "Oh yeah, you're that political band, aren't you?" And I said, "No, Ted, that's not right. That's you too. Sorry." So anyway, so we just at that point, I think, was right about the time we said no more R.E.M. songs. In other words, if somebody wrote a song that sounded like an R.E.M. song, we rejected it because we'd had enough of those.
Can you paint a picture of the space where you would gather when you were now off the road after Green, and where would you go, and what was this place like, and what was the sort of physical situation of writing songs together?
Well, we had bought an old back in the 1800s a house in downtown Athens, and we'd put our offices upstairs and our rehearsal space downstairs, and it was incredibly tastelessly decorated, and it was perfect for us, and we could go there and relax and spend as much time as we wanted and goof off and work hard and present songs to each other and move freely from instrument to instrument. We had our own stations, but within each station were several choices of what you wanted to play. So there was complete freedom, complete creativity to throw all the rules out before Out of Time and just do what felt like whatever the new thing was going to be.
Okay. Would you write music and Michael write lyrics in different zones, or did this all happen in the same time and place?
Generally speaking, we would write. Peter, Bill, and I would write the songs, bring them in, show them to the other guys. We'd work that out as an instrumental, and then show them to Michael. And one of the things that I like to say about R.E.M. is that because we did it that way, the songs had to be interesting to us without lyrics, without melodies. We had to already like the songs and see something special in them before Michael ever got a hold of them. So there was no song simply as a vehicle for more lyrics. They were already songs in their own right before there was a singer on the band, which was great. But so in most cases, that was how we worked, although there's a notable exception. The riff to Me and Honey, I was just sitting there playing that on the bass and just enjoying it. I just sort of come up with it, and I was enjoying the sound of it. And Michael said, "Keep playing that." I said, "No, it's in D flat. I can't keep playing it. It's really hard." He said, "Just do it." So I said, all right. So I played it, and he sat there and scribbled away furiously, and I think wrote the words to Me and Honey in about 5 minutes while I played the riff over and over again, and I'm still suffering permanent crippling arthritis.
Play it the rest of your life. Yeah.
But no, he did that, and he said, "Okay, I've got it." I said, "Great. Well, it needs one more chord," so I put one more chord in it, and it was done. So sometimes things work really quickly, and it's really nice sometimes to have Michael in the room while we rehearse.
Was there a sense of any kind of deadline as you were writing Out of Time? Was there any end game at the time, or were you in a phase where you're like...
Are you just going to reference every title and song? No.
What?
No, not for a while. We knew that we weren't going to go into the studio until we were ready. And since there was no tour looming, we didn't have to have things ready by the time the tour was booked. So not touring was also one of those liberating things that made into going this record, that went into making this record as creatively free as it is. So no, there was no pressure at all until we got in the studio and we couldn't agree on a title. And we just couldn't. We always have these sheets of paper in the studio that says, name this record. And people would scribble things on it, some of which were serious, some of which were not. But through that, we usually found something we could all agree on, and we could not agree on a title for this. And then literally, our manager, Burtis Downs, came into the room and he said, "Guys, if we don't have a title by tonight, the record's not going to have a title." I said, "Well, I guess we're out of time." And we all looked at each other and went, well, there it is. I guess that's it.
I love deadlines too. A lot of guest musicians, both vocal and non-vocal. Was this a big step, a big change from prior records, or had the quality of making a studio record with strings and extra parts that you knew weren't going to carry to a stage?
There was a certain freedom in knowing we didn't. Well, it's kind of two ways. I mean, we knew at some point we would tour with these songs, and we would want to reproduce them in some fashion. At the same time, we chose to approach it as though we never had to do that. So, we didn't use a lot of studio trickery or anything that would be hard to reproduce on stage in that sense, but we felt like we could have strings, we could have a rapper, we could have Cecil Welch play flugelhorn on a song, which is a sentence I really like saying. And, so it was really just a completely free, wide open record to make, and we took advantage of that.
How did KRS-One wind up on the first track?
Michael had met him somewhere, I don't know where, and came to us and said, look, he said, I want Chris to rap on this record. And we said, great, who's Chris? And he said, that's KRS-One. Oh, that guy, yeah, sure. So I've always gotten a real thrill out of breaking down musical boundaries. I hated the formatting of radio that happened in the 70s where, if you listen to a radio station, it could only play hard rock, or it could only play chick singers or top 40, and pardon the sexist reference to chick singers, but I'm making a bigger point here. And but I just think that all of a sudden radio, which used to play everything by everybody that was any good, all of a sudden became very, very segregated in terms of style and genre, and that always annoyed us. And so when we found an opportunity to blend two, on the surface, very disparate genres, we said, absolutely, let's do that.
Great. And so Kate Pearson of B-52s appears on Shiny Happy People. Again, an unusual song that was just so different and sweet and shiny. And there she is from the B-52s. I'd love to hear you talk about that was a band that was coming up at the same time out of the Athens scene, your relationship with them and how it led to Kate being on the record.
Well, I mean, I love the B-52s as anyone should. But actually, by the time I got to Athens in January of '79, they had already moved to New York State. They already signed their record deal and were gone. So
really?
I didn't meet them for some years. But of course, their legacy in Athens was strong. Michael heard, when Peter and I worked up Shiny Happy People and brought it in, Michael heard the round. He had the idea of it going, me, Kate, him, or whatever the order was in his mind. He wanted to hear three different voices, and of course, we loved Kate's voice. We loved Cindy Wilson's voice. So Michael called Kate and asked if she'd come in and sing, and it happened late in the process. We were already at Paisley Park, well into the mixing process when she was able to come in and join us, and she sang that beautiful. She went into the room and lit her candles and turned the lights down and sang that beautiful part, and then. Michael said, look, while you're here, why don't you do something on Me and Honey? And she just came up with that beautiful wordless melody and made that a much better song than it was before.
Neat. The song is such a paradox. The title and the chorus almost seem like a trifle, but there's a lot of other elements to it, and the guitar riff at the top is one of the most amazing things.
I wrote the initial chords on acoustic guitar, and without that little it's not quite as frivolous a song as it sounds like it became. But literally the second I showed that to Peter, he immediately played that guitar line. I said, well, that's cool. Yeah. And then later, he ended up writing the verses, and it became this song that when presented to Michael, he said, okay, I'm going to write a happy song. Nobody does that. It's actually very, very difficult to write a non-cynical, purely happy song.
Right.
And you'd think it would be easy, but it's really not. So Michael went after that, and he did it. And I think we all knew we were going to get a lot of shit for it. And, but the hell with that. I mean, it's like you can't be cool and angsty 24 hours a day.
There's your takeaway quote, folks. That's great. If I don't ask about losing my religion, there will be a riot. But what's your favorite story? What does history need to know about that song from your point of view?
Well, from my point of view, I think it's an oft-told story. But Peter showed it to us, and we were working on it, and everything sounded great, and I could not come up with a bass line. It had to be low-endy enough to hold down the bottom because the mandolin is such a light on the top sort of instrument. But and it had to have a little melody to it, but not much, because there was already plenty of melody going on in the song, and I just could not think of anything. And so I don't know why, but I said, what would John McVie do? Because he's a great bass player. And I said, well, let me see if I can channel some John McVie here. And within 5 minutes, I had that bass line. And so wherever you are, John, thank you. You don't get any royalties, but thank you anyway.
Well, the song had so much air. It had so much beautiful space in it that sonically it was just a real masterpiece. And
Well, it's maybe the most unlikely hit ever since They're Coming to Take Me Away. Ha ha ho ho. Hee, hee.
I don't know.
I mean, it has no chorus. It has no guitar except an acoustic guitar, very well played by Peter Holzapfel. It's a mandolin song, for crying out loud. And how that became a hit, nobody knows. It was just the right song by the right band at the right time, and it's a great song, and people responded to that. And that's the one of the coolest things about music is it was a worldwide international hit to people who don't speak English, and that's just the power of music. If it's done right, it speaks, and you don't have to have words to speak that language.
You sang lead on a couple songs on the record, Near Wild Heaven being one of them. What would go into the decision for you to sing lead on any given R.E.M. track?
Well, if Michael had writer's block, that was my cue.
Okay.
Actually, sometimes if Michael had writer's block, we would just throw the song out. But for both of those songs, I heard something, and I said, well, I'll sing this for you guys, and if you like it, I'll keep going, and if you don't, we'll throw it in the trash heap. And, so I guess what I sang, Peter and Michael and Bill all thought was worthwhile, so I kept it up. And, Near Wild Heaven is really kind of a dual vocal between me and Michael. And then Texarkana, which has nothing to do with Texarkana, by the way. It just seemed to work, and it's nice to have a change. I think Michael was happy for people to hear a different voice.
Had it happened before?
Not really. I mean, Superman we did because it was just a song that Peter and I both loved so much that we did it in the studio, and I think we might have actually been a little short of songs on that record. I'm not sure, but no, it's I mean, when you've got one of the best singers in the history of rock and roll in your band, I don't need to be interjecting myself any more than I did. So, but yeah, if you got a great song and you don't want it to get wasted, I'll sing it.
You must have felt to a degree like a duet partner for Michael, though your harmonies and his voice really were a phenomenal part of the band. You were
Thank you.
You were Emmylou to his Graham.
Well, I'm a melody guy. I love melodies, and sometimes I would sing harmony with Michael, which is the same pattern, just different notes. And then sometimes Michael was very much about counter melodies. If you go back to Harbor Coat, that was Michael's idea to give me those melody lines. And don't ask me what the words are because I don't know. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm all about melody, and R.E.M. was all about melody. Peter's arpeggiation gave it melody. My bass lines had melody. Bill's orchestrated drum lines had melody. Michael Stipe's voice had melody. Bill Berry, one of the great underrated background singers in rock and roll, did some beautiful stuff. The Beach Boys' ooze on Near Wild Heaven are Bill Berry, and they're brilliant. So we just had a lot of people that liked melody, and when you put that together, you get a lot of stuff going on.
Cool. We're going to have time for maybe 4 audience questions, and I'm not sure what the system is, but I think there's a microphone over there, and we're kind of winding toward that bit. So those who are especially motivated begin to think of that. We're heading towards that. And on the subject of melody, it seems like a good pivot to what you're doing now with composing music and being in a situation.
Plug time.
Well, it's more than that, because anybody that makes song-based music and music that's got musical sophistication, I'm sure has in the back of their mind, what would I do if I were free from the business of choruses, melodies, and words?
Well, what would I do if I were free and knew one of the best classical violinists in the world right now, who asked me to write some music?
Robert McDuffie.
Robert McDuffie, a childhood friend, one of the great classical violinists of our time, asked me to write a half hour of music for violin, rock band, and string orchestra. And I'm just dumb enough to say yes. So I've written this piece that is, I think you can get it on Amazon now, actually. There is, one of the songs is up on SoundCloud for free. which everybody loves, free. So I've written this concerto that is out on CD soon, and we're touring it starting October 20th in Miami, Florida. And the thing about that is worth mentioning here is that when you're writing, as I said, I love melody, and when you're writing for semi-classical, combining rock and roll and classical with no voice, it's all about the melody. And if the melodies aren't good, the song will be boring. The whole piece will be boring. So I really got to exercise my love of melody on this and try to write the best ones I could, because you're speaking through a violin instead of through a human being. So it's a very melodic set of movements, and check it out if you like.
Are you notes on paper? What's the method that gets this? I don't know how much background.
It's like Bananarama said. They asked Bananarama why they lip synced and didn't play their own instruments. So they said, well, we could do that, but that would take years. So, can't argue with that. So, yes, I could notate music, but it would literally take me years to do it. So I brought in this brilliant arranger named David Malamud, who's a great guy and a genius musician, and he's the one that helped me translate my ideas into actual notated music so that the string players could play them.
And McDuffie suggested the actual format.
Yeah, it was his idea.
Rock band and
yeah. He said I'm tired of playing music by dead European white males, and I said, well, okay, we can fix that. So I wrote this thing under Bobby's aegis, and it turned out pretty well.
Do you have a strain of your musical listening and loves that are, whether it's contemporary classical or just purely instrumental conceptual stuff? Is there things we'd find in your house that...
Oh, yeah, I grew up with classical music because my father was a dramatic tenor, and I went to sleep many nights listening to Franco Corelli sing Nessun Dorma from Aida, and that kind of thing will stay with you. So when Bobby, what Bobby and I were trying to do, just like we were talking earlier about KRS-One combining hip-hop and whatever R.E.M. was doing, what we're trying to do here is the same thing, which is to show that the distance between classical music and rock and roll is not as great as you might think. In fact, there's really no distance at all. And you can combine them and make something really beautiful and powerful and fun and exciting, and not stuffy, which is the great thing about it. Is we have the best elements of classical music and none of the bad stuff, which means you have to sit on your hands until the song's over.
Okay. Are you going to tour with it?
Yeah,
you are touring.
October 20th in Miami. No Nashville, unfortunately, but we'll get here eventually.
Well, just before we go to the audience questions, let me just ask if you could just kind of summarize for folks and for me the recent years here, ending the band, looking ahead at what you wanted to do and how everybody kind of dispersed to find themselves in this amazing post-R.E.M. time.
Well, when we talked about breaking up, we all realized that we were all thinking about it, and it had occurred to each of us individually. And we talked about it. We said, well, you know what? It feels like it's time. The record contract is up. The music industry has changed beyond all recognition. We've accomplished everything we can think of to accomplish. We love each other still. There's no acrimony, no legal issues, no ill will whatsoever. Let's do something that really no one's ever done and walk away while we're still friends and still, legally competent. And we said we're still young enough to go out and have fun and do other things, and we've all done that. Michael is, of course, doing his artistic photography and sculpture and starting to sing again. And Peter's already made 3 solo records. It took him about 6 days, I think, to do it. And so we're all still friends. We all have dinner. We all have a great time.
Oh, fantastic. Do we have a system yet worked out for audience questions?
We're ready.
Tom Truitt on the spot.
Got this guy right here.
Hi, Mike. I just wanted to tell you from the first time I heard you guys outside the Pike House here at Vanderbilt, and I think it was ’83. The outside the fraternity house, there had to be 200 people listening through the doors, not let alone what's inside. But I wanted to ask you something. How much before you decided to make your last album, how far in advance did you know that that was going to be the last album because, for me, I think it's, if not your best album, one of the best you made.
Thank you. It was strange. I mean, it was bittersweet. And the funny thing was, Michael put some clues in there for people. All the Best is very much a goodbye song. If you look at the cover, it's the only time we were all three on the cover of an R.E.M. record ever. And so it was okay because we were all at peace with it. I mean, it was hard, it was bittersweet, it was daunting, but it was not terrifying because we all knew that it was the right thing at the right time.
Hey, Mike. New Test Leper is one of my really favorite R.E.M. songs, and the thing that got me into it, first off, was because of the bass line in it. I think that's my favorite Mike Mills contribution song. And I loved that song for a long, long time. And then I read a couple of years ago that Michael Stipe said that that was his greatest lyrical triumph. And so I guess I have a couple of questions about that. One, is there a song for you where you feel like you really nailed it that's like your greatest triumph of a song? And secondly, just what went into New Test Leper and how that song came together?
Well, I'm glad you like it because it's basically a 4-minute bass solo. And I mean, I always restrained myself, except on that song. I said, guys, I'm just going for it on this one. And Peter rolled his eyes at me and said, go for it. No, it's genius lyrics on Michael's part. A very heartfelt way to deal with, Michael grew up with a lot of religion. I think his grandfather, maybe both his grandfathers were preachers. And so, and in the South, of course, it's a very religious place, as we all know. And so that's always a part of your life. Whatever you believe or don't believe, it's certainly something that's present in every day. So I thought it was fascinating the way Michael dealt with it. And it's a really fun song to play. And I'm really glad that Peter wrote it so we could do that with it. Was another part to your question? I missed it. Oh, well, I guess if I had to pick one bass line that's maybe Life and How to Live It is maybe my favorite bass line ever for what that's worth. Thank you.
Mike, thanks for coming. You referenced melodies in the Beach Boys. I've read often that you and Bill were big fans of Brian Wilson. How much did Bill have or if any, influence on Up and My Most Beautiful, and for that matter, any records moving forward after he departed?
Well, I wish Bill had stuck around long enough to sing on it, My Most Beautiful, because his voice would have been perfect for it. As I said before, he's the one doing the Beach Boys' ooze on Near Wild Heaven. And of course, Ed My Most Beautiful is very, very definitely an homage to Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys. It's just the joy of singing. There is a joy to get out there and make noise without any outside agency. It's already here and everybody's got it, and I'm sure we all do it in the shower, I hope. And that's really what that song is about to me. Is just the joy of having a voice.
Mike, my vote for best bass riff in an R.E.M. song is South Central Rain.
Wait, I'm sorry.
South Central Rain.
There you go.
Bass riff, but I love that. But I want to ask you, I read recently where you said that Man on the Moon was really the most definitive or most representative R.E.M. song from your standpoint. Why is that? What was so special about that song?
With Man on the Moon, it's one of those songs where all of the elements are present. All of the elements are there in their finest form. It's got brilliant lyrics. It's got great instrumentation. It's evocative. It's slightly mysterious. It's one of the two songs, along with Losing My Religion, that we never got tired of playing. They were both in every set, every night, every show, and there was never a question about leaving them out. It was not because we felt like we owed the audience. We played them because we loved them. And to me, Man on the Moon is just the essence of a complete song, and the video is really good too.
So, Mike, I'm easily one of the most influential bands in American history. For all rock, pop, doesn't really matter the genre. And you guys have songs that, as a musician, are varsity level. It's really hard. If you want to learn that, you got to woodshed for a couple of weeks and make sure you get it right. And then you've got these wonderful songs that have made it into the pop culture, like End of the World and stuff like that. Question is, how do you differentiate on the stage and during a show? I don't know. And during a show, between the two types of songs, because you've got some that are just there that you can dance and jump around to, and then you've got songs that are varsity level musicianship that require focus just to get through correctly on stage. Is there a difference in writing those and performing them?
Wow, that's a question I've never thought of before. I guess when you make a set list, which we changed every night, you kind of do it by feel, really. I mean, some songs go together and need to be played one after the other. Some places feel like they deserve a certain song rather than another. The musicianship aspect didn't really come into play. The thinking of the quality of the songs didn't really come into play. It was more just you go by feel. And every time you make a set list, you're just vibing it, really. And whatever feels like the right song to play that night is the one you play, or the ones you play.
Hello, Mike.
Hi.
Talk a little bit about your decision to go from the short-haired guy in blue jeans and a t-shirt to long hair and the frickin' nudie suits on the Monster Tour since we are in Nashville.
Well, I knew that was going to be a polarizing decision. The hair thing just happened. I mean, that's just, although I will tell you this, I blow-dried my hair every day of my life from the time I was 18 till the time I was 30, and then I said, fuck this, why am I doing this? And so, it got a little wild after that. But as far as the suits go, I'll tell you the story. When I was a kid, every weekend I would watch the Porter and Dolly show. And Porter Wagoner had these suits, and the irises of the cameras back then were really slow. So when the lighting would hit the sequin and direct it right at the camera, everything would literally go black for a second because it took the iris that long to adjust to this really bright light. And then by the time it did, the light was gone and the iris opened back up. So I'd be watching Porter, and I was just going, what the hell is going on here? And then, so that was the real beginning of it. And then you look at, Graham Parsons and George Jones and all these ridiculous suits. I said, well, I want to do that. Looks like fun. So, plus I wanted to give the people on my side of the stage something to look at. So I asked the guys, I said, look, I think I want to start getting these suits done. And of course, they already thought I was insane, so they said, sure, fine. So this gives me a chance to mention my dear friend Manuel, who makes these suits. They're called nudie suits, but nudie was dead before I ever bought my first one. Manuel makes them. I still go by his store, as you should all do. Even if you don't buy anything, just go in there and look at this stuff. It's amazing. And so, I felt very honored that I was able to get somebody to make me those suits and put them on and wear them. And I didn't really give a damn if people liked them or not. I was going to do it because I liked them. So.
We've got two more.
Mike, a question on everybody's mind. Will we ever get to see R.E.M. play live again?
Yes, we have a DVD with the special deluxe set of Out of Time that has R.E.M. playing live on it. And it's pretty cool. As far as just being able to walk into a venue and seeing it, I wouldn't hold my breath, no.
Hi, Mike. I feel extremely honored to be here right now. So, my dad went to the University of Georgia from 81 to 85 and was one of the first people to be in the radio station, the local University of Georgia radio station in Athens, to play R.E.M's music. And so for me, you know, being the son of my dad to be here, I feel like it's very much a full circle thing. So first off, I'm very honored. So on sort of that note of next generation, so I'm a next generation R.E.M. fan, you know. I grew up listening to it because my dad would play it. So how do you feel about your legacy in terms of your influence on further generations of musicians? Yeah.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad that you've come on board. As far as a legacy goes, really, you know, I'm certainly very proud of everything we've ever done. I think we held it together pretty well. I got to say that really, if there's anything that I would expect younger musicians to learn from us, it's that you don't have to do what you're told. You can make your own way. You know, everybody's got ideas and everybody's got suggestions, and you can listen, but don't take them unless they make sense to you. You're the one that's got to look in the mirror the next day. Whatever money you make, you got to feel good about making it. And just remember that if you're any good, your ideas are what's working, not some record company guy or some management guy or whatever you read in the magazines. It's got to come from within you, or it doesn't really mean anything.
Well, my friend, I am honored too. It's been a great treat to talk to you, Mike. Thanks a lot.
My
Let's
pleasure.
get on with
Thank
some
you.
music. Thank you, Mike. Mike Mills, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.